Oh, hello. Don't mind me, I'm just coming back from my court hearing. You might have been able to tell considering I'm wearing my best Sunday clothes. Yeah, I was found guilty of violating Nintendo's user agreement in the first degree. But while I was in the courtroom listening to the judge go on about this and that, the courtroom actually reminded me of something. The violent video game hearings of the early 90s. The early 90s, right? Where everything was loud and in your face and where short attention spans and extreme sports reigned supreme. Of course, I missed all of this being born in the late 90s, but I have some experience with 90s media. Ninja Turtles, Spider-Man, Sonic, Power Rangers, Mortal Kombat. It was really a boom for period for entertainment, and nowhere was that more apparent than in the video game world. With most kids and gamers from the 80s growing up, video games kinda grew up with them. Sure, you still had your Mario, Sonic, freaking Bubsy, but a new kind of genre started to take shape. Violent video games. Games like Doom, Wolfenstein, and Mortal Kombat were released, and boy oh boy did they take the video game world by storm. We already talked about Doom here on the channel before, and I still haven't played any of the Wolfenstein games, so let's talk about Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat is a video game series I'm really familiar with. I own Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection on PS3, I played Mortal Kombat 4, Deadly Alliance on GameCube where you move with the D-pad and not the analog stick, ew. And Deception, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, Mortal Kombat, and you know what, I've just played all of them, except Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. My first introduction of Mortal Kombat was Ultimate Mortal Kombat on Nintendo DS. I didn't own it though, my cousin did, and every time we would go over to my aunt's house, we would always play through DS Wireless Play. Yeah, I remember that. Oh, only have one game but two DS's? Well, turn on DS Wireless Play and play together that way. So many memories with Wireless Play. There's just something so simple of being able to play together even if only one person has the game. Not like nowadays where you need both games. Now it's probably because DS games are like 10 to 40 megabytes in size, while the Switch games could easily range from 1 gigabyte to freaking 35. Come on, with only 32 gigabytes of system storage, Nintendo could have done a lot better than just 32 gigabytes. Well, at least the OLEDs come out with 64. But back to Mortal Kombat. For the longest, the only Mortal Kombat game I ever played was 3, until sometime later, I'm not really sure when I was at my cousin's house and we played Deception on the GameCube and here we are now. For the longest though, the one that always eluded me was Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. It wasn't until 2012 when I was scrolling through the PlayStation Store and saw Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection for $4.99, and then quickly begged my mom for it, where I finally got around to playing them, and I remember playing them for hours and hours on end. My cousin and I would even have days where we would just play it all the time whenever we were together. But naturally, the first one I played was Mortal Kombat 1. And it's definitely aged. It's pretty slow, moves are pretty simple given the limitations of the time. Each character gets 2 special moves specific to a character and 1 fatality, and they're all pretty simple to get. I mean, all you have to do for Liu Kang's fatality is hold the block button and rotate the stick clockwise, and that isn't a fatality. And there's no combos either. Your moveset consists of high punch, high kick, low kick, and a block. It's pretty much bare bones as you get. I think I've always been pretty decent at the first Mortal Kombat game. When I first beat it, I beat it in about an hour to hour 45 minutes. It wasn't that hard except for obviously Goro and Shang Tsung, so let's see how I fare now.
Wins.
Dang, what difficulty am I on? Alright, that's enough for me. Man, can this game be pretty cheap. I may be accustomed to Mortal Kombat 11's gameplay, but I know AI input reading when I see it. It can be really cheap, and the only point for that was to get you to spend more coins in the arcade. And now, it kinda ruins it. Okay, so maybe ruining it a lot. But despite this, believe it or not, the first game is definitely the easiest of the original 3. In Mortal Kombat 2, the AI still reads your inputs, but this time they're way more aggressive with it. This is the only one I haven't beaten, and is the sole reason why I don't have a platinum trophy on this game yet. It's because of cheap stuff like this. And that's why Mortal Kombat 2 is the Mortal Kombat game I play the least. And then in Mortal Kombat 3 you have Jade. And Shao Kahn moves spamming moves back to back like if he was a late game Elden Ring boss, hardly giving you any time to hit him. So, how did a game like this get so popular when its gameplay was so slow and basic from its competitors like Street Fighter? The visuals. The characters in this game are real people who were scanned into the game, and back then, this was revolutionary. It wasn't drawn like Street Fighter, this was the real deal. Oh, and I guess fatalities too. Fatalities are the main selling point. After the end of each round, the announcer says finish him, and fun fact, the reason the character spins their head around is because John Tobias was inspired by Street Fighter 2, where the character would get dizzy. Well, just enter a certain combination of buttons and we're off to commit war crimes. Who would have guessed that the simple act of pulling someone's spine out would cause such controversy? Yeah, the violent video game hearings of the 1990s all started because of Mortal Kombat, which led to the creation of the ERB. So yeah, basically Mortal Kombat is the sole reason this little box at the corner of video games exists now. Imagine how it is to be the sole reason a kid had to play Sneak Keen instead of Grand Theft Auto. Well, considering Mortal Kombat has made millions of dollars and is still going strong to this day, I like to imagine pretty good. Obviously, it's nothing too crazy these days considering... And let's not forget... Yeah, despite that, some of these can be pretty crazy. And I don't think the characters being real people help much either. But let's take a look back to before there were multiple timelines, complex stories, sub-timelines, and a bunch of characters, and look at some of Mortal Kombat's humble but not so humble beginnings. It was 1990 and John Tobias had just finished making Smash TV when he came up with the concept of Mortal Kombat. He was frustrated that their engine wasn't being used to its full potential, so what could he do to show the full power of an arcade machine? Digitize graphics, the art of recording someone and inserting them in the game. That's how John thought how a fighting game would work best, considering that you don't really need to do much except for a few animations, which in turn won't overload the CPU. It's so cool to look at the videos of them working on the game, obviously having a good time, and seeing all the inner workings of the game. Ed Boon would join short time later, and together both would pitch their idea to management, just for it to be rejected. Apparently, fighting games weren't doing too well at the time. Then Street Fighter 2 came out, and we all know how that turned out. And that's when Midway took a look and said, oh, we'd like some of that money, and greenlit John and Ed's idea for Mortal Kombat. Everyone knows the development team for Mortal Kombat. You have John Vogel, Ed Boon, John Tobias, and Dan Forden. And if you don't know that, well, then how did you get here? These people made Mortal Kombat into what it is today and made it into one of the most successful franchises of all time. But how do they do it exactly? Well, by targeting it to college students, of course. It was violent, gritty, and a far cry from Street Fighter 2's colorful and hand-drawn aesthetic. Marketing the game towards young adults was definitely a good idea, since people who were looking for a more mature game compared to, let's say, child-oriented Mario and Sonic games would have something to do, and everyone knows younger kids just flock to whatever the older kids are playing, until they eventually ruin that and move on to destroy something else. With Mortal Kombat's violent imagery, it incited the video games hearing. Yeah, the tension was already there and was already brewing up and was gonna happen eventually, but as soon as Mortal Kombat was ported to the NES and Sega Genesis and people saw Sub-Zero tearing someone's spine out, that was a straw that broke the camel's back. So with the violent video game hearings, I have no doubt in my mind that it made the games they were talking about become way more popular than if they hadn't talked about them. And then there's the music. The music has, well, the sound effects I guess, while sounding pretty old, still hold up pretty well, and it was all composed and created by Dan Forden, who is still involved with NetherRealm Studios to this day. Well, when you start up the game, if you wait a while, you get a brief summary of the story and backgrounds of the characters. Kano murdered Sonya's partner, so she's here to arrest him. Sub-Zero murdered Scorpion and his clan, and now he's back for revenge, even though it was later retconned. They packed quite a bit of lore into this. The story is that Shang Tsung wants to merge Earthrealm with Outworld, and the only way to do that is to win 10 consecutive times in a tournament called Mortal Kombat, which, thanks to Goro, Shang Tsung has a win streak of 9 and only needs one more to merge the 2 realms. So it's up to you to beat him with any character ever choosing. And that's the story. It's pretty simple. There's no mention of Shao Kahn or Elder Gods or anything of that sort. So for the characters, we have Johnny Cage, a Hollywood actor who's partaking in the tournament to show that he can actually fight and do his own stunts. And he's inspired by Jean-Claude Van Damme, breakout action hero of the 90s. He was supposed to be the main hero of the game, but something about commitment issues, I don't know. Then you have Kano, who's a member of the Black Dragon King in Chicago. Yup, he was American until the movie came out and changed his nationality to Australian because both Ed Boon and John Vogel both liked Trevor Goddard's performance of him. Though it should be important to note that Trevor Goddard was British and not Australian. It's not a big deal though, since now it's kinda like a tribute to him. Then there's Raiden, who is an immortal thunder god who looks at the mortals with contempt. So much so that in his ending, he gets bored fighting with the mortals and invited other gods to the tournament, which results in a multi-year war that ends with the world being destroyed. Yeah, this was before he became the leader of the Earthrealm heroes in the very next game. And then we have Scorpion, everyone's favorite. He's a vengeful specter out for revenge for the death of his clan and family. He's rivals with Sub-Zero, everyone's other favorite. Yeah, these two are the popular characters in the game. Despite being palette swaps of each other, they're pretty similar, as in they both have a move that grants the player a free hit if it lands, but they're also polar opposites since Sub-Zero is centered around ice and Scorpion is fire-based. And they also both belong to a clan. Scorpion is part of the Shirai Ryu and Sub-Zero is part of the Lin Kuei. What's the difference? Well, the Lin Kuei is a group of ninjas that adopts babies to train them into ninjas, and then eventually turn them into cyborgs, while the Shirai Ryu splintered off from the Lin Kuei and now teach a modified version of their skills. These two characters, besides being ninjas, are pretty cool just for their lore alone. And then there's Sonya, Special Forces agent, who almost didn't make it into the game until they realized, maybe we should put a girl in here. She's here to kill Kano since he killed her partner before the events of the game. And then there's Liu Kang, a White Lotus monk, who was also the main character. It doesn't take long to realize who he's inspired by. From his yells and grunts to what he looks like and wears, no doubt that his inspiration is Jackie Chan. Him being the main character obviously means his arcade ending is the only one that's canon. Well, besides Scorpion. In his ending, he kills Sub-Zero in retaliation for his family's and clan's murder. We know it's canon because Noob Saibot exists. But somewhere deep in the game, there's a secret fighter, Reptile. The only way you can fight Reptile is by fighting on the pit stage and getting a double flawless victory, but you have to do a fatality without blocking, and it has to be a normal fatality and not a stage fatality because that won't count. But that's only if you see something fly across the moon on the screen, which only happens like every 6 rotation or so. Are you keeping up? So after you do that, only then can you face Reptile, only to get absolutely bodied in a few seconds. Come on, how is anyone supposed to know that? It's so specific that I'm surprised people were able to find out about it. And on top of that, Reptile is hard. It's just a simple palette swap of Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and he even shares a few moves with them. Man, he's still hard. I've only ever faced him once, and that was about 10 years ago around when I got the game because I looked it up. Now, the reason he's just a simple palette swap of Scorpion and Sub-Zero is because of CPU and memory limitations, and that's why there's only 7 playable characters. They had just enough room to add one more palette swap, so why not make him a secret character? Oh yeah, and Goro and Shang Tsung are characters too. Goro is the sub-boss. He can be pretty cheap. Most of his attacks don't do much damage to him. His attacks do a lot of damage, and sometimes your moves cancel out so he could grab you. And sometimes he jumps off screen and then comes back to stomp on you. Yeah, I lost a lot, and I didn't have that much of a fun time. And then there's Shang Tsung, who's kind of a pushover compared to Goro. And fun fact, Liu Kang and Shang Tsung are both played by the same actor. Shang Tsung has some fire-based attacks, but his main ability is to transform into a different character. He's still pretty tough, but not as tough as Goro. And then there's also an endurance round. 3 of them. They're just 2 rounds against 2 characters back to back. These can honestly go either way. There's times where they've been not too tough, and then there's also times where I just have a bunch of trouble with it. But we can't talk about Mortal Kombat without talking about one of its most famous glitches. Ermax, short for Arrow Macro. And because of this, many people thought another secret called Ermac was in the game. To add to this, it would change Scorpion's clothes from yellow or red. But in the end, Ermac was nothing more than a statistic in the ROM. For now. Mortal Kombat is definitely one of the more important ones when looking at the history of video games. Not only is it still going strong to this day, it has multiple TV shows, 3 movie adaptations, it spawned a bunch of knockoffs, and for better or for worse, it created the ESRB. And while it hasn't aged particularly the best, it's still kind of a fun game to go back to every once in a while, even if it's for a bit.